Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If the two of you would be so kind, would you mind introducing yourselves?
I'm Jack, and I play guitar and vocals in Ruinless.
And I'm Sam, and I play guitar and bass in.
Jack and Sam, welcome. Tell me, how would you describe the music of Ruin Lust?
We were just discussing this. What do we settle on?
Grinding death metal. Maybe?
Yeah, that's probably the most
Blackened death metal.
blackened, grinding death metal, somewhere around there.
You guys get called a lot of things. Black and grinding death metal. Sometimes it's get called war metal. It seems like the death metal is the part that you guys are most interested in.
I think so. At least that's sort of how the music kind of comes out. In terms of what I think we're doing, it maybe is more of a grind project, but then it sort of turns like once it's sort of collectively put together, it kind of ends up more in like death metal territory, I think.
And you guys have a few slower, dirgier kind of songs, but would you say for the most part, Ruin Lust is a fast band? Would you say that your songs are mostly fast?
Yeah, definitely.
If you don't mind, for the people who aren't familiar with your band, can you give me a little bit of history as to why you guys formed and what your intentions were when you first put the project together?
Sure. So it started as a three-piece with me, the drummer Mike, and our former bass player Seth. And it kind of grew out of a crust band that we had in like the mid 2000s that broke up. And this was all like back in Santa Cruz. We're all from California originally. And then I moved to New York for school, and Mike moved out here, and Seth moved out here, and we just sort of started playing together again, but just doing something completely different, almost like a repudiation of the crust band, I think, in a certain way. And I think the original intention was maybe not, hasn't really changed that much even to this day, like kind of to play like black and sort of grinding death metal. And, I think our first demo was like pretty primitive, but not so much by design. Maybe just that's kind of about what we could come up with. And that's, as the band has sort of developed and we've added members, Sam joined in like 2013.
Yeah, I think so.
The sound has kind of developed, and all of our playing has gotten better. So it's kind of grown. Like the music has pretty much grown in direct relationship to just our ability to play.
And when you say that the sound has developed, in what way has it developed? What would you say the difference was between Ruin Lust in 2013 and Ruin Lust now?
Good question. I think that part of it is just at that point we were doing started in 2009, broke up in like 2012, kind of like never officially broke up, but like I moved to California, and it kind of became a recording project, and that really limited what we could do. Like the songs were written remotely, and we would just kind of get together and record.
They were done in like kind of quick bursts, where we would write riffs and send them to each other a bit, and then Jack would fly out. We would spend about 2 or 3 weeks writing, and then record in a few days. And where like this last record, Jack lives back in New York. We spent a year writing, and so we really had the time to like actually polish everything, and develop it in a way that we didn't really have quite the chance to on the past stuff, just because of the time.
Yeah, I guess in terms of the way that it's developed musically, I think maybe uh, the things that we were all sort of initially interested in doing, uh, the types of bands that we like all listened to, like it was the things that when we would try and talk about it, it was always these like small details that kind of uh, come out after multiple listens. Like that's the stuff that brings me back to records. You know, like if something is like catchy but sort of generic or straightforward, I love some of that stuff too. But like sort of buried details that kind of emerge as you get to know a record better is kind of what keeps me listening. And I think that we increasingly sort of tried to do that. And especially on this record, I think we kind of like, you know, there's a lot of mostly Sam, like a lot of really subtle guitar work that might not be obvious on a first listen, but if you kind of keep going back to it, you know, there's a lot of little details in there that kind of, I think, filled out and developed the sound.
And that partly
Gotcha.
comes from having the time to like hammer out the songs and rehearse them a lot and really develop those little like, details in what you're playing.
Gotcha. Uh, I want to talk about your songwriting a little bit more, but before that, Jack, you said something very interesting. You said that in some ways, Ruin Lust is a repudiation of what you're doing with your previous Crust project. In what way? Like, in what way was a reaction to your old Crust sound?
I think, you know, it's funny. I feel like punks that play metal is like kind of a cliche, and it's maybe even something that like a lot of people sort of describe with a certain amount of embarrassment. And I wouldn't say that's the case for us. Like we definitely like identify as punks to whatever degree. I mean, none of us have played in a punk band in 15 years, so I don't really know what that means. But like, you know, there's like kind of a core, like ethical core that's still there. But at the same time, I think I at least started to kind of get bored of late 2000s, you know, growing up in or going to school in Santa Cruz as an adult, like there's like in Northern California in general, like a kind of there's like a vegan straight edge scene on the one hand and like a kind of like goonish power violence scene on the other. And as those things sort of like rose in popularity, I kind of found myself like kind of alienated from both, you know, being a vegan dude that played power violence.
Yeah.
And the Crust band was sort of right in the thick of that. It was like enormous. We had 8 members or something. And just all these sort of ideological differences between us kind of turned it into a chore by the end. You know, I love all those guys. But Ruin Lust, I think, was like just like a really stripped down. Like the idea was to do like a sort of stripped down, angry project that was more kind of imagistic and like more aesthetic. Not to say that it doesn't have a politics, but that it isn't like demanding a particular kind of perspective. And that was, you know, I feel like this is honestly like maybe part of the reason that there like the punks that play metal thing is like such a weird issue now, is that there were like so many defectors from the punk scene in the Bay Area in like the late 2000s and probably on the East Coast too, so I'm not as familiar.
I mean, it's funny about the punks that play metal thing. You know, I grew up on like, you know, I'm a dirtbag Hesher. I grew up on like, you know, Megadeth and Iron Maiden before I got into, you know, death metal and grindcore and stuff like that. But I'm also vegan, and I'm also, you know, I guess you could call it straight edge in the sense that I don't do drugs or drink or anything like that. And so like I've gotten it from the other side as well. You know, like metal dudes were like, oh, you're not really metal if you're vegan. You know, you're supposed to be drinking pig's blood or whatever. And it's funny because like I've spoken to a number of bands on this podcast who, you know, came from more of a punk background, but grew up on the stuff that I grew up on. You know, they're maybe 15 years younger than me, but they love Bolt Thrower, they love Entomb, they love, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't really have an axe to grind one way or another. I just, you know, it's funny that like these punk kids zeroed in on, you know, everything that was great about death metal in the late 80s and early 90s in a way that I think a lot of metalheads really took for granted. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that like maybe that's part of it. It's like the bands that you identified, and I would probably add Autopsy. You know, for us, where it was. I don't think that we're like necessarily like a good time band. You know, like it's like conceptually like pretty serious, and uh, I think the anger is pretty authentic. At the same time, that like what was sort of drawing me away from punk with bands like Autopsy and Bolt Thrower and stuff was that there was like um, a kind of joy that is really palpable, especially when you see bands like that.
Yeah.
That not to say that it wasn't there uh, for other people in the punk scene, but it just wasn't speaking to me in the same way, I guess.
Yeah. And to be fair, all these bands grew up on punk and hardcore as well. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't an outside influence. They, you know, everybody from like Death to Morbid Angel had some kind of like interest in hardcore when they were writing their music originally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's like maybe speaks to the question of why it's sort of hard to figure out what genre we are. Is that I don't know the bands that we listen to, uh, like and the sort of I don't know the ethos of like those that earlier moment when the genres weren't quite so like hard and fast defined. You know, like black metal, you know, in its entire history seems like it could sort of include almost its own opposite. You know, like the like early black metal sounds so like bears so little resemblance to like contemporary black metal in a lot of ways,
Right. Yeah.
and I think that there's something cool about sort of trying to like blur those genre distinctions um, because they're artificial.
So we spoke a little bit about how previously, Jack, when you were living on the opposite coast, you guys were writing music remotely and trading files back and forth. Now that you're all in the same city, is it mostly writing in the rehearsal room?
Mm, it's a mixture of like Jack and I both write riffs, bring them to practice, and then Mike will help us like, sequence everything. Arrange. He's a very good arranger. Um, there's not maybe a ton of like riff writing that's happening at practice. Mostly happening on their own.
Yeah, a lot of times Sam and I will meet up like in advance of practice and either just like either we'll like have specific riffs that we're gonna try and work on, or just like try and meet for like a riff session. But
And then like nitpick each other's riffs.
Yeah.
And keep refine them like endlessly until we're both happy with them. But
Yeah. Yeah, neither of us have like musical backgrounds either, so it's more just like Sam will play something at some absurd speed that's like so like 20 notes later I will be like, no, that other note, and he'll just like almost have to be like looking for the individual thing that I thought sounded cool. And but yeah, we're like pretty strict in terms of what qualifies as a passable ruinless riff, so it sometimes takes a long kind of a while.
mm-hmm.
So what's the answer to that question? What makes a riff a ruinless riff? What's the feeling that you're looking for?
Mean, not overly complex, I guess.
I'm always shooting for like some kind of like melancholic rage, uh, basically. uh, but at the same time, yeah, I think it's important. It's like not in keeping indulgence to a minimum, you know. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that we've tried and scrapped just because it's a little bit too flamboyant or like theatrical or something like that. And uh, you know, I think like it just needs to be hammering.
Yeah, there's a directness to Ruin Lust that's very, when you guys get called like black and death metal or war metal or whatever, I think that's what people are referring to. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't mess around.
Yeah. No time for that.
So you'll be releasing a new album called Dissimulant on the 29th of September through 20 Bucks Spin. When did you guys start working on this album?
Yeah.
The
Sorry,
first
can you hear me?
song that we wrote was I think the first song that we wrote for it was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
But most of it was done during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right?
I had some of the first riffs for it, um, in like 2017, actually, or 2018 maybe. And I moved around that time. I moved like late 2018. I moved back to New York and we started working on it. And like, this is probably the most material we've ever scrapped. But yeah, so really, 2019. It's been almost 5 years.
Musically, how would you compare Dissimulant to your previous album, Choir of Babel?
I think it's more focused.
Yeah, definitely.
That was something. We're pretty hard on ourselves, and I think that we all like wanted to with every record try and figure out what we think worked on it and what didn't. And there was like a kind of, I like that record. Don't get me wrong, but
I like that record too. Yeah,
we,
I'm not
we wanted to eliminate the meandering, and I don't know that this is stuff that really translates to anybody other than us, to be honest. Like, because like we've always kind of been black or growing metal thing, but trying to like just get at like trim the fat and like really keep things focused. I don't know if catchy is quite the right word, but maybe it is, and like have the song be kind of standalone, but also like kind of cohesive.
Sam, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, just what Jack was saying about it being catchy. I do think like it is important to make sure there's riffs in there that like stick in that like you can grab onto, and that like kind of stick in your head. Those are the things that I always like pop out when I'm listening to anything. It's like that riff that comes through, and like a catchy riff, and it becomes like the thing that distinguishes that song.
Yeah.
So like having something in the song that like you remember, like, oh, that's the song that has this part in it, or whatever.
Gotcha. I'm curious as a three piece because both of you guys write on guitar, but Sam, you play bass live. Is that correct?
No, I play guitar live, and we've had like a variety of live bassists. But yeah, on the recording, I play bass and guitar. But when we write, we don't really write with bass, for the most part. The bass kind of ends up coming in during the recording. Like I think this last record, I hadn't played the bass since the last recording, I think. But the bass basically follows the guitar. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a guitar-driven band, and the bass is there to like fatten it up and make it sound thick and heavy.
Yeah, I guess we have played as a three-piece once.
We played one show as a three-piece, just with no bass. But yeah,
yeah, we've actually for this record, we kind of decided that, particularly with Mike, our drummer, like just don't think about how we're going to pull this off live. Just like make it as relentless as possible. and
we'll figure it out.
and we'll figure it out later. And he's like the primary vocalist, so it's sort of especially hard for him. And now, when we start playing shows again, we're gonna play with a different drummer, and he's just gonna do vocals, which I think will be cool.
Cool. Yeah. I'm curious why, you mentioned that you have um, bassists playing live. Why don't you have a full-time bassist with the band?
Bad luck.
Yeah.
So it's not intentional, basically.
Definitely not
I
intentional.
think also like maybe a desire to not have another cook in the kitchen for writing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a bass player would definitely have to be like,
I mean, we just haven't found the right
maybe we haven't found
person.
the right person, but yeah, it's mostly just been various complications.
I think you need to put out a Craigslist misconnection. Black and Death grind band looking for a fourth stringer who understands us.
We have a bass player to play live. But,
yeah, a friend from other bands.
Yeah, our bandmate from.
Do you want to say who that is?
It's Alex DiMaria plays in Morbid Sphere with us, and he also plays bass in Yellow Eyes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Where did you guys?
Sam and I are.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Sam and I are in another death metal, kind of art death metal project called Morbid Sphere, and they're like, it's kind of in like a small group of people around here that are in probably more bands than there are people involved in it. But those are the two that we kind of contribute to.
Where did you guys end up recording the album?
In our practice space.
Yeah, recorded in our practice space named Nolan Voss, who is just a magician.
Yeah.
Who made it sound like we weren't in a practice space.
Yeah.
Kind of surprising, you could like hear you
could hear other bands playing while we're recording, but yeah.
Luckily that didn't show up on the recording. But yeah, again, kind of sticking to like to the extent possible, like kind of DIY ethos.
Yeah. So you mentioned that Nolan Voss engineered this. Nolan is in the band Anacon. He also works as an engineer with a lot of the bands in the New York area, like Gravesend, Skull Shitter, and Woe. You mentioned he was your friend, but are there any other reasons that you wanted to work with Nolan?
Well, we had worked with him on we did some demos for Morbid Sphere, and he recorded them. We were really happy with how they came in, and we really just enjoyed working with him. He's like very funny and like pleasant to hang out with. So yeah, I mean that was basically it. We really liked working with him, so we wanted to work with him.
Also, like anybody that's on the East Coast looking for somebody to record, he's like very affordable. He probably charges less than he should. I don't know, maybe he'll change his mind after this. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's clearly doing it for the love of the music, not for a paycheck,
Yeah, absolutely. How would you describe his approach as an engineer?
He's just very focused on getting it to sound how you want. I know we've worked with people before who kind of wanted to produce the record and steer the way it sounds a bit, and he doesn't do that at all, which I really appreciate. He just wants to like make sure you're happy with how it sounds.
He's very patient.
Yeah.
and as you mentioned, he's an Anacon. He's like a very talented musician, so it's not like, I think that he's pretty good at like knowing when you've got like a workable take and when you don't, and like he's not like a perfectionist, but like also, and is like pretty, if anything, he's like pretty helpful in realizing like the thing that you're freaking out about is not going to be noticeable, so there's like real standards there, but also like helping us move forward, which we needed, I think.
Sorry, I missed if you said this, but did you track this live? Or did you track
No,
separately?
uh,
Okay.
tracked separately. The drums, actually did the drums first with no guitars, because that's how Mike wanted to do it. And
No, did it with a scratch. Did it with a scratch track guitar.
oh, did he use the guitar this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
He and I just did it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did drums first with a scratch track, and then end up tracking the guitars and bass after that, and then do a couple layers of overdubs, and then vocals. Yeah, and I think we kept the scratch track in this. Yeah.
You want to say anything about the gentleman who mastered this?
Dan
Yeah.
Lowndes.
He does a great job. We worked with him a few times in the past, and yeah, I was really happy with how it's sounding.
Also, he's just incredibly. He does work very quickly. That's very good, and again, like legit affordable. Um, Sound engineer, and we'll work with again.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Dan Lowndes has a lot of credits as a master and as an engineer. People probably also know him from his work with Crucimentum. For you guys, what would you say Dan brought to your sound?
It's just kind of like that last layer of like helps everything congeal together. And, I don't know, made it extra heavy sounding.
Yeah, I think that like I didn't necessarily think of this record as being super heavy when we wrote it, but he brought that out of it. And when talking about it, he was like, "Okay, let's just make this as heavy as fucking possible." And I think that's what he did. Kind of found something in it that I didn't notice there.
What do you guys have planned for the rest of the year? Do you have any tours coming up or anything happening at the beginning of next year?
Early next year, we have a tour with Imperium, the East Coast tour. But that's kind of a show in November here, like a late record show, and like getting this new live lineup kind of together in time for that. Yeah, that's what we have booked so far. Yeah, been talking like we'd love to do a West Coast tour at some point, but we have yet to hammer out the details of that.
So by the time people hear this episode, Dissimulant will be out through $20 spin. Sam and Jack, how can people order the album? What's the best way to get it?
You can get it from the $20 spin website and from their Bandcamp. I think it's also available there. Yeah.
That's correct.
Or you can come to our show. Come to our shows and you can buy them there too. Yeah.
And do you want to say anything about the vinyl versions that $20 spin is putting out?
Vinyl version. It looks. I mean, we haven't actually seen it physically yet. People have them. I've seen them on the internet. They look like they came out great. I'm very excited to see it. I spent I do all the art for the band, and I spent a lot of time refining and working on this one. So I'm very proud of it. So I don't know. I hope people appreciate it.
And if people want to follow Ruin Lust online and find out about the tour that you guys mentioned, what's the best way to do that?
We have a Instagram, finally.
That we just started.
Oh yeah, we started like a month ago. And it's Ruin Lust Death.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sam, you mentioned that you do the artwork for the band.
Mm.
Are you a visual artist in your
Yeah,
other work? Yeah.
I'm a printmaker by like I went to school for printmaking and I've been an illustrator and I tattoo. So yeah, I do. I'm a visual artist, I'd say.
Do you want to tell people where they can check out your artwork?
Oh, sure. My Instagram is just Samuel Bennett. 2 N's, 2 T's.
Cool. Is there anything else you guys want to say?
I don't think
I
so.
don't think, yeah, I don't. Thanks for having us.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Cool.